Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, Wallace.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, Christina.
So, Wallace, today I wanted to talk to you about the human ego.
Yes, a very important subject, probably the most important subject in the world.
Exactly. And that's why I thought I'll do the human ego today, because there's a lot of definitions of what people see ego. And I wanted to sort of have a discussion on what you think of the topic today.
Right? My definition. And for me, the human ego is anything that is attached to our own personal identity. In other words, me as a person, myself, my identity. That is the ego, and everything that is unattached to my personal identity is the spirit.
And how I see ego, like you say, it's an identity. It's a self-identity of us being connected to our humanness, and the idea of eliminating an ego is really impossible, because as long as you have a human body, that human consciousness, it's attached to that. What do you think?
The ego, a lot of people have the idea that the ego is in some way bad, inherently bad, like it's not, it's just your identity. And that's all it is. And the point is, the Buddhists talk about being non-attached to your identity, So you can have all these different identities of a father, a mother, an Australian person, or whatever, but you don't have to let them influence or affect your behavior. You can just have them as part of your way you function on this earth.
Train the ego to work with the soul, for the ego to operate from its healthy functioning, so that it actually works with you than against you.
Human beings are spiritual as well as egotistic. And the two have to work together at all times for a person to be balanced and to function well, both within themselves and in society. And if people aren't aware of that, and you see, because the ego is made up of all kinds of patterns of behavior and learned behavior and learned beliefs and so on and so forth, if we just function out of those, then we're going to hit problems in life. We're going to hit it up. Say, take a life challenge we might have. If we're functioning from a belief, I'll give you an example. If I'm going for a job interview and I have a deep egotistical belief that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, then I go into that job interview feeling inadequate and I'm not able to perform well. Whereas if we are in touch with our spiritual selves, we might have that thought, right? But we would go to our spiritual selves and we would learn from our inner guidance, which comes from our spiritual self. And our inner guidance would probably send us a message: that's not really who you are. You are perfectly capable, you're completely adequate, and you're actually a genius. So why would you feel inadequate going into this interview? But without that spiritual dimension to guide us in life, then we can be truly lost, get caught up in the ego, its beliefs, its ways of functioning, its learned behaviors, its conditioning. And then what happens is we meet a new situation and we approach it with old behavior patterns, and the two don't mix, because that's what creativity is. It's bringing your original self to an original problem. But what most of us do is we face an original problem as in a new situation, like a job interview, and we bring all our conditioning with us to that new situation, and then bang, stress and problems occur, because we're not functioning with our in a way that matches the life situation that we're facing. We're functioning from old conditioned behaviors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and with the ego, like I've always said, the ego is not really interested in your spiritual development, in personal growth. And so for the ego, it doesn't see anything pleasurable with having a spiritual life or following a spiritual path, because it's really focusing on materialistic things in the world, where that is not really alluring, for the ego, where the ego is like, but does this bring me pleasure at the material level?
Yes, I mean, the ego, as you rightly said, Christina, its only concern is survival. It's actually closely related to the animal part of us as human
Yes.
beings, and it's all about survival. Whereas the spiritual part of ourselves is about transcendence.
Yes.
And all the higher spiritual qualities like beauty and love
And joy.
and
Yes,
grace
correct.
and fun and all that comes humor, that comes from our higher spiritual selves, whereas the ego is just concerned. Life is serious, you got to get real here, you got to survive.
Yeah.
And that's true. Like, let's not knock it either, because we
Right.
do have to do that.
Yeah, we
But if
do.
it's not balanced with our spiritual nature, then we just become this overly serious, rigid person. And I'm 67 now, and you see a lot of people are 67 and they're just locked into their egos, and they're old-fashioned and they're rigid in their behaviors, and that's because their ego has run their whole life.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think what you just said about the balance between when to use the ego for survival, and when to really step into, when people talk about stepping to your power, which is your soul, that spiritual part of you, that higher part of you, is to really know how to balance the two, to go out in the world, to at the, using your ego, your personality for that sense, and then really balance back in. And it's like the ego goes through a transition, it's going through a journey itself, because, but like you said, the butterfly, it turns into the butterfly of the ego, of the soul.
Yeah. Although I would draw a distinction between the ego and the personality. I mean, for me anyway, I think the personality is just your quirkiness, your human qualities, what's unusual or unique about you in terms of your unique quirkiness. And we can use that personality and that quirkiness. It's, your personality is what your wife loves about you or hates about you. And you can use that quirkiness for spiritual purposes, or you can be expressed through the ego. It's there the whole time, right? But the ego is something else. The ego is your conditioned behavior. It's what you're brought up essentially to believe about yourself and the world. As an Australian, for example, you would have certain beliefs that you might be unconscious of that would be common to many Australians. And you could live your life through that, to do with sport, for example. I don't know, rugby, if you're unattached to your ego, you can enjoy these aspects of your conditioning, go to a rugby match and shout for Australia, but at the end of the day, not be at all upset, or you might be temporarily upset for fun, if Australia lost, but you wouldn't go out of the match nursing that grumpiness at all. So, it's the ego is, we can enjoy life through our ego as long as we're not attached to it, really, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. It's the identity of attachment. And like, I was just thinking as you were talking, when people think of, the soul, or going in within, and people automatically think that, oh, I have to give up the worldly possessions or, you know, enjoying life, but you don't have to, as you know, you can still enjoy what you have, and as long as you don't make it, you attach to it and make it your number one priority. Where if you do that and you have an attachment, and that's where suffering comes in, because you've attached yourself to whatever it is, that you are this, you are that, and therefore when you do that, and that's when suffering happens, because you're attaching yourself to you as a person, your name and your nationality, you know, and therefore it becomes like you and I, like we're separate rather than one, a unity, and having that experience in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I actually tell you a little story. I used to work as CEO of a company, and it was a personal development training company, so I thought I was pretty cool, you know. And until my second command came to me and told me he wanted to take over the company, and could I leave, please? Which were, but I left, and it wasn't an ego problem. But what was interesting was that once I left the company, I had a spiritual awakening and lost my ego, right? And then I actually realized quite clearly how attached I'd been to the position of being a CEO, to dressing like a CEO, to behaving like a CEO, and to having the aims and aspirations and goals of a CEO. I was attached to all of that, but it was only after I lost my ego that I could see that clearly, and how it drove me, you know, how it drove me in life. And that's the incredible thing about attachment, is we can be attached to so many things and are completely unaware of it. And those attachments drive us in life, you know. They really do. And that's the root cause of so much stress in society and in ourselves, you know. There's only one humanity, and that's the human race. There's only one religion, and that's a religion of love. There's only one country, and that's planet Earth. You know, all these subdivisions are from the ego, right? And the result of our identities, you know, like there's Australia because I'm an Australian and we do things differently and we're better at this and we're greater at that. The ego creates these different structures, and we have to have structures for society to function. But as you say, Christina, it's when we get attached to them, it's when we feel threatened. Our ego feels threatened if my identity of Australia is undermined because they lost a rugby match to Ireland. Come on, Ireland. So the ego feels threatened or some way let down or disappointed, you know. So it's to be able to enjoy these things, but have no attachment to them whatsoever. And you know something, Christina?
Yeah.
You say, I think that spiritual people are the true materialistic people. And I'll tell you why. Because when you come at life from a spiritual perspective, you can really enjoy your material life. You can really enjoy your cup of tea. You can really enjoy your lovely electric car, and you enjoy your home because you're not attached to it. It means you live in the present and you really appreciate all these things, the material things that you have, and non-material to things too, like your relationships, you know. So I don't really buy it that somehow materially you're worse off if you're a spiritual person. That's only another story of the ego. You know, to keep itself in control, you know.
So on that note, I just wanted to say thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate and loved talking about the human ego, and I'll look forward to see you next time.
Great, Christina. Thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem. So take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Sure. Bye.
Bye.